Imagine a man who wanted to show mercy, but instead built the ultimate symbol of terror. This isn't a horror movie plot, it's the true story of Joseph-Ignace Guillotin and the invention that would forever bear his name, even though he didn't actually design it. Let's travel back to the late 18th century, to a France on the brink of revolution. It was a time of immense social upheaval, but also a time of Enlightenment ideals. People were questioning everything, including the brutal and unequal ways justice was served. At the time, if you were a commoner sentenced to death, you faced a gruesome and often bungled execution by hanging or beheading with an axe or sword. It was a public spectacle, messy and agonizing. But if you were a nobleman, you were granted a swifter, more dignified death by a skilled swordsman. Enter Dr. Joseph-Ignace Guillotin. He wasn't some bloodthirsty radical. He was a physician and a politician who believed in progress and human decency. On October 10, 1789, standing before the new National Assembly, he proposed a revolutionary idea. He argued that the death penalty should be equal for all, regardless of social class. He envisioned a method that was fast, painless, and decapitates with the swiftness of a lightning strike, ensuring a humane end, free from the prolonged suffering of traditional methods. His goal wasn't to increase executions, but to reduce the cruelty inherent in them. He believed that if the state must take a life, it should do so with mechanical precision and minimal pain. It was a humanitarian argument, rooted in the belief that even a condemned person deserved a shred of dignity. The assembly was intrigued. They agreed with the principle of a single, less cruel method of execution. But Guillotin wasn't an engineer or a craftsman. He had the concept, but he needed someone to bring it to life. The task was handed over to Dr. Antoine Louis, the secretary of the Academy of Surgery. Dr. Louis was a brilliant and respected anatomist. He studied historical beheading devices from across Europe, like the Scottish maiden and the Italian mannaia, to understand the mechanics of a clean decapitation. Dr. Louis concluded that a straight or crescent-shaped blade wasn't reliable enough to sever the neck cleanly through bone and muscle every single time. The blade needed to be angled. This simple but ingenious modification was the key to its terrifying efficiency. He drew up the designs for a machine with two tall uprights, a heavy, angled blade, and a simple release mechanism. With the blueprint ready, the next step was to build a working prototype. This job fell to a German harpsichord maker named Tobias Schmidt. It might seem like an odd choice, but Schmidt was a master craftsman known for his precision engineering. He took Dr. Louis's designs and built the first functional model. They tested it initially on live sheep and then on human cadavers from a nearby hospital. The results were chillingly effective. The machine worked perfectly. It was fast, clean, and brutally efficient. The device was initially called the Louisin or Louisette after its designer, Louis. It was only later that the public, with a taste for dark humor, started calling it the Guillotine, forever linking it to the man who first proposed the idea of a humane machine. The day came for its first public use. On April 25, 1792, a huge crowd gathered at the Place de Grève in Paris. The condemned man was Nicolas Jacques Pelletier, a highwayman convicted of robbery and murder. There was a palpable sense of anticipation and morbid curiosity. This wasn't the familiar, dramatic spectacle of the axe or sword. A new, strange contraption stood in the square. Pelletier was secured, the blade was released, and in less than a second, it was over. The crowd was stunned into silence. It happened so quickly that many felt cheated out of the gruesome spectacle they were used to. It was too clinical, too impersonal. The efficiency that Dr. Guillotin had hoped would bring a measure of humanity to the process instead created a new kind of horror, the horror of cold, mechanical, and impersonal death. The machine had turned killing into a swift, industrial process. What Guillotin and Louis had intended as a tool of merciful justice was about to become the engine of the French Revolution's darkest chapter, the Reign of Terror. Beginning in 1793, under the leadership of Maximilien Robespierre and the Committee of Public Safety, France descended into a period of extreme paranoia and political violence. Anyone deemed an enemy of the revolution could be sent to the guillotine. What was once meant to be a rare and humane act of justice became a daily, horrifying spectacle. The National Razor, as it was grimly nicknamed, worked tirelessly. In Paris alone, over 16,000 people were officially executed by the guillotine in just 1 year. That's an average of over 40 people a day. The list of victims included King Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette. But it also included thousands of ordinary men and women, priests, nuns, journalists, and even the very revolutionaries who had once championed the machine, like Georges Danton and eventually Robespierre himself. The Place de la Revolution, now the Place de la Concorde, was said to be perpetually stained red, the smell of blood hanging heavy in the air. The guillotine became the terrifying symbol of the revolution's descent into madness, a relentless, insatiable machine that consumed its own children. For Joseph-Ignace Guillotin, this was a living nightmare. He had proposed an idea to reduce suffering, but his name was now synonymous with mass slaughter. He was horrified by how his concept had been twisted. The guillotine became a cultural phenomenon. Children were given miniature toy guillotines, and people wore guillotine-shaped earrings. It was the very opposite of the solemn, dignified process he had envisioned. Guillotin was a moderate, and during the peak of the terror, his own life was in danger. He was arrested and imprisoned, narrowly escaping the very machine his name was attached to. After his release, he was a changed man. He spent the rest of his life trying to distance himself from the invention. He was so ashamed and horrified by the association that after his death from natural causes in 1814, his family petitioned the French government to rename the device. When the government refused, his family took the drastic step of changing their own surname to ensure they would no longer be connected to the infamous symbol of the terror. The story of the guillotine is a powerful lesson in unintended consequences. Dr. Guillotin started with a noble, humanitarian goal, to make death humane. But in the process, he and his collaborators inadvertently gave death a new, terrifyingly efficient face. His attempt to strip execution of its brutal, medieval character resulted in a modern, industrial form of killing that made mass execution possible on a scale never seen before. He wanted to be remembered as a man of science and mercy, but history had other plans. His name is now forever etched not as a healer, but as the namesake of the instrument that became the ultimate symbol of revolutionary terror. He tried to make death humane, and gave it a face instead. Thanks for watching. If you found this piece of history as fascinating as I did, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more stories from the forgotten corners of the past. Let us know in the comments what other historical ironies you'd like to see us cover. See you next time.